Hey everybody, it's Matt Cox and welcome to The Grind. Today's video is going to be about Graham Stephan and a video that I watched of his, actually watched it a few months ago. And I remember it was a really good video. It was a video about credit and about building credit and getting to, I think he had gotten to an 800 credit score. We get into it, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment, share the video. All right, here's what I liked about that video, and the reason I wanted to basically do a video. I don't know, it's not like a reactionary. Is it a reactionary video? I don't know what people call it. I saw the video that he did, and I liked the way he did it. He broke the basic credit factors down into their percentages and really did a great job on explaining how the credit score system works. He starts the video off by explaining that he had just gotten over an 800 credit score, which in most people's opinion is a perfect score. I've actually seen people with higher credit scores than 800. Of course, I also own a mortgage company, so I saw lots and lots of credit. The reason I wanted to do a video talking about credit and the credit scoring system is because how fascinated I was by the amount of research that Graham had gone into to put his video together. And the thing is my experience in credit is vastly different than Graham's for a variety of reasons. But let me go ahead and explain why. Graham obviously got credit at an early age and started building his credit, and said something like he'd been building it for 9 years and he'd gotten very close to getting an 800 credit score. He got to like 799 at one point, and I thought, wow, this guy's been working on this for a long time, and he's also, utilizing his credit. So, when you're using your credit periodically and you're opening cards and closing cards, or I guess in his case, he's just basically been just opening cards. So when you're opening cards and you're buying cars and paying them off, it's hard to really build that credit history and get that high score. And he's done everything right. I think it was 9. I think he said 9 years. My point is, I thought it would be interesting to do a video that showed the difference in my experience with credit and Graham's experience with credit and building credit, let's say. So let me give you a little bit of background on me, if you don't know. I owned a mortgage company for 5 or 6 years. And obviously, I worked as a mortgage broker for roughly a year or so before I opened my own brokerage business. And I'm going to give you the quick version. Quick version is, I was a mortgage broker for about a year or so, and when you become a mortgage broker, it really depends on the lender, obviously, or the bank, or whoever you work for. If you work for a bank, you're basically a loan officer. You don't have to be licensed, or a lender. But I would work for a brokerage business called Eagle Lending initially. I worked for that company, then I opened my own company. But at Eagle was very hands-on. You basically underwrote the files before you sent them to underwriting. You processed most of your own stuff. Most loan officers don't do that. And you pulled your own credit. You looked at the credit. Most loan officers don't look at their own at these guys' credit. It's all done through a system. But at that point, and in most brokerage businesses now, you pull the credit, you see the person's credit. So I got very good at learning how to read people's credit. And once I ended up opening my own brokerage business, and I started seeing not only the credits of the people that I pulled on a daily basis, but I hired whatever, 2 or 3 guys at first, and then it turned into 5 or 6, and then it was 10. Before you know it was 11 or 12, 13, 14 guys are working for me. And every day these guys are pulling 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 credits a day, and they're bringing in credit profiles for me to look at. And we pull like what's called a tri-merge, which is all 3 credit bureaus, typically. So I'd look at the credit and I could go through and I could determine, what was helping people's credit scores and what was hurting them. At that point, this was 20 years ago. This was 20 years ago. There was no real, was this 20? Maybe it's, yeah, this was about a little over 20 years ago. There was not as much known about the credit scoring system as there is now. Now you can very quickly, you can break it apart. Back then it was still kind of a trade secret. But I very quickly realized how to build people's credit, how to figure out what was hurting them. You know, sometimes somebody comes in and you say, hey, look, you know, you got to pay off these 2 credit cards and come back in 2 months. Your credit score will shoot up. And one of the things I started doing, which Graham actually talks about in this video that he has, is he talks about what's called piggybacking. So I started somebody would come in and maybe they're 20 points off from getting a loan. I would add them to one of my credit cards. And then my credit history would report on their credit history and they would boost their scores because I had perfect credit. So here's what I'm getting at is eventually I ended up getting in trouble. I was placed on federal probation. I was buying and selling houses, and essentially I ended up, you know, I think the charge started off as like lying on it was like basically lying on an application or something, and I think I ended up pleading guilty to like wire fraud or something. It's funny that the charge I pled to was like wire fraud against the United States, which makes no sense at all, but I don't know, that's what I pled to. It had really nothing to do with my charge. That charge, my first charge. Trust me, there have been lots of charges. I ended up losing the mortgage company and I ended up starting a much larger scam. Well, when I started that larger scam, I'm not going to get into all the ways at how this whole thing kind of developed, but I basically started creating fake people. And I figured out, eventually I figured out how to get Social Security to issue Social Security numbers to children that didn't exist. And then I would build a credit profile based on those false Social Security numbers. Another thing I would do was I would survey homeless people, and if they didn't have any credit at all, I would just go out and I would get credit cards in their names. Or maybe sometimes they would have some issues with their credit, and I would either pay off their credit or I would go and get a Social Security number issued to a child with the same name as a homeless person, and I would then mirror those two together, or merge. I guess I would merge those two together and create a new credit profile. You're creating what's called a synthetic identity. So I would take a little bit from this person, a little bit from this, and I'd create a completely new identity. And the credit system is so fractured that it's actually not difficult to do, and it's people still do it today. But when I was doing it, nobody was doing it. Now I think a lot of people do it. It's a major issue. Now it wasn't then, and so what happened was I realized right away what the formula was. The minimum credit lines you had to have were 3 trade lines, 3 credit cards. They could be, it could be let's say a car loan, 2 credit cards, or a car loan, a credit card, and a mortgage, or whatever. They wanted you to have 3 minimum, and they wanted you to have a credit score. At that time, it was you had to have. Well, I mean, depending on whether you went subprime or conventional, honestly, it could be anything. Who knows? We did stuff for people that had 500 credit scores, but on average, for you to get a loan through a conventional lender, which is basically going to your bank, you needed a 620 credit score. And I believe now it's up around 650 is the minimum. So, but the credit, it was just as difficult to get a 620 as it is to get a 650 now. So it's the same thing. What I'm getting at is that I realized that these synthetic identities that I was creating, although I created this synthetic identity, they didn't have credit. So if you pulled their credit using the new SOC or the person's SOC, and no credit would show up because they had no credit. So I realized, okay, well, I have to build credit for these guys. And the formula was this. I would get 3 secured credit cards. Could be anything. $500, $400, $600. I put the security for the credit card. I'm not sure if you know how a secured credit card works. It's not a debit card. It's not a prepaid debit card. They're not like a regular well, they are like a regular credit card, but you're actually putting up the money. You're giving the bank $500 and they're giving you a credit card worth $500, and they're actually giving you a credit line. It's not actually, that money's not coming out of your $500. That's what's called a prepaid debit card. Those don't report to your credit. So you want a secured credit card. So what I would do is I would get 3 secured credit cards, maybe for $300, $500, $400. So I get 3 different ones from 3 different banks, Bank of America, Chase, whoever, First Premier. They pretty much give anybody a credit card. So I would get those credit cards and I would make the payments and keep them almost virtually paid off completely. And I would just make the payments for 6 months. Well, in 6 months, these guys would have 700 credit scores. They'd have like a 690, 710, 705. I mean, it was out of the gate. But you had to make 6 months payments on time, which is what I did. Well, obviously I built those credit histories, and I didn't build 1 or 2, I built dozens. So I had dozens of these guys, and I was doing different things with them, mostly dealing with real estate, but there were other things I was doing where it was building up the credit and then getting a bunch of personal loans and or credit, or upping the applying for department store cards and major credit cards, and I would just get a whole bunch of credit and then run it up and then make a couple payments and stop paying. Or I would, with a lot of the guys, I would buy houses. So I'd buy 4 or 5 houses. I would then refinance those houses using an inflated appraisal, and I would pull out $100,000, maybe $150,000 per house on each guy. And each guy would buy maybe 5 houses. So each guy would borrow a couple $100,000 per house, pull out $120,000 on each house. Plus, of course, you have to factor in the fact that they bought the house and cleaned it up a little bit, whatever. Make a few payments. So if each guy bought 5 houses, it was basically each synthetic identity borrowed like $1 million. And out of the $1 million, maybe $500,000 or $600,000 of it was profit. I'd make 3 or 4 months worth of payments, and then I'd let them all go into foreclosure. Well, I'd run up their credit cards, of course, borrow more, some personal lines of credit, and then make a few payments, and then let everything go. Whatever, $500,000, $600,000. That's like that comes like $500,000 or $600,000 in profit per synthetic identity. I think in Tampa, I did that to the tune of, I think the FBI said it's like $11.5 million is what I think they said. And they said different things. They said 15 million. They said 12 million. They said 25 million one time. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it ended up being like 11.5 million is what I borrowed. So in Tampa, because there's multiple jurisdictions that I had issues with. The point is that I did this, and I did this for a couple years, and I ran this real estate scam. But what I did was, it was a lot to do with the credit and creating perfect credit for these borrowers, which, really, when I say perfect credit, I mean minimum. Like, I didn't get 10 credit cards. I didn't need 10 credit cards. It wasn't about the money, it was about the credit score. So with that said, here's what happened. Obviously, I took off on the run at some point. I got chased by the FBI, Secret Service, and eventually they end up catching me. I go to prison. Obviously, I remember it was like every other week I was getting served with different lawsuits where I was being sued for foreclosures. I mean, they're suing Matthew Cox as James, James Red, Matthew Cox. They're listing all these different things, and all these different title companies were suing me for foreclosures, or because I owed this title company $300,000 and this one $500,000 and this one $1 million. I mean, it was just left and right. Bank of America, I think I actually got hit with an enhancement for Bank of America because the government said that I had borrowed, or I guess I'd caused more than it's like 1.2 or 1.3, something like that, over $1 million worth of loss to Bank of America. And it was the same thing with Countrywide. I got hit with an enhancement for Countrywide because it was the same thing. And then Bank of America owned Countrywide. We tried to argue that it was, it was a double jeopardy. They were hitting me for the same enhancement twice, and it didn't matter. Listen, nothing was going my way. Fast forward 12 and a half years. So 12 and a half years later, I get out of federal prison. I go to the halfway house. And the nice thing about getting out after 12 and a half years, not that there's a lot of nice things. Well, one, getting out, that's always a plus. I know plenty of people that aren't getting out. So, but the nice thing about getting out is that I had no credit. The first thing I did was I tried to pull my credit. I tried to go to a free annual credit report, which Graham talks about in the video, how, oh, you can get a annual free credit report. Well, I couldn't. I couldn't get it because all of these security questions that they asked me, I didn't know the answers to, because there was no credit. They were coming up with these questions that you couldn't answer because there was nothing. The questions were just random, but none of them connected to my actual credit report because my credit report was non-existent. So I couldn't answer the questions because they were, I don't even know where they were getting the questions because they had nothing to go off of. So I could never get my free annual credit report. Instead, what I did was I actually while I was in the halfway house, I went and applied for an auto loan and had them pull my credit. Because it was actually a time when I thought, well, this is nuts. Like, I thought maybe someone stole, like the questions they were asking, they just had nothing to do with me. They were like, have you ever lived at which of these addresses? Well, none of them. None of them. Who have you ever had a mortgage with? And it'd list it, and I was like, none of those have I ever had a mortgage with. Who's your car loan with? None of them. I mean, nothing matched. So I ended up going and applying for an auto loan just so that they would pull my credit so I could determine whether or not I even had credit or whether someone had used my credit. Well, it turns out that I had zero credit at all. The guy gave me a copy of the credit report, which I was thrilled with. I then turned around while I was in the halfway house and I ordered 3 secured credit cards. I ordered one credit card with, was it Citi? Who do I have credit cards with? No, I have credit. Yeah. Citibank. So I got one with Citibank. I have one with Wells Fargo, and I have a credit card with Capital One. So I got 3 credit cards. I actually, it's funny because I actually first went to Bank of America to open a bank account while I was in the halfway house. Denied. Would not. They opened the account and then they closed it a couple weeks later. I applied for a secured credit card with Bank of America and they said no. Bank of America is so upset with me, they won't even take my cash because obviously I still owe them a few million. And of course they bought Countrywide, so I owe a couple million to Bank of America. Anyway, the point is that they wouldn't even give me a secured credit card. But the halfway house had an arrangement with Wells Fargo. So I went to Wells Fargo and I opened up a checking account and I opened up a secured credit card and then I opened up 2 more secured credit cards. And I just, one was for like $400 and one was like $700 or $800 and one was, I forget. It's funny because I opened up one credit card for, let's say, $800. I then used that $800 to write myself a check for $400 so I could open up the other credit card. I then opened up another credit card for $400 using that money. And then over the course of about 2 months, I paid all of those off. So it was really the same $800 got me $1,600 worth of credit. Well, security for the credit. I'm gonna try and wrap this up. Well, what's interesting is that, and this is why I like the juxtaposition between myself and Graham Stephan. He's got like an 801 credit score. Well, after 6 months, I walked out of the halfway house, and just before I left the halfway house, I pulled my credit. Actually, my Wells Fargo, is it Wells Fargo? Is it Wells Fargo that has it? Just before I left the halfway house, I pulled my credit score, which is my FICO score, through Wells Fargo, because Wells Fargo offers a service where every month you can get your FICO score. So I got my FICO score, and my FICO score when I walked out of the halfway house was like a 740, was 745, I think. I think, and my credit right now, I was going to wait a month to do this because I know it'll be a little bit higher in a month, but that was that a year ago? Yeah, that was roughly a little bit over a year ago. Well, so it took me 6 months to get a 740-ish credit score, and I guess it's been about a year since then. So right now I have I think I have a 749. What do I have now? You know what do I have? As of October 27th, which I guess it's a month, I could pull it again now. I had a 749, so I'm gonna throw that up there. And I have a 749 as of right now. So 6 months after I left the halfway house, each card basically matured, and each one of those credit cards returned the security. So Citigroup sent me 400 bucks back. Wells Fargo, they raised my credit limit to, I want to say it's about 1,600 bucks. I think I gave them 700 or 800 bucks and they doubled it. So I want to say it was about 1,600 bucks. They raised $1,600 and they gave me the 700 or 800 bucks back. Capital One, same thing. They sent me my money back and raised my credit limit. You know, I don't put anything on the cards. Graham goes over all of this, by the way. He really breaks down like what factors into your credit score. What I was saying was it's comical to me how he comes at everything from one avenue, which is of course completely analytical. He's reading all the papers and he's looking things up and he's doing the research and he's this. And the way I came to the same conclusions that he came to was, you know, boots on the ground, surveying people, pulling credit, seeing credit every single day, me allowing people to piggyback off my credit and watching people's credit scores jump up, or me just getting synthetic identities and then getting them 3 or 4 different credit cards and then making the payments until boom, their credit scores shot up through the roof. Or because for the first 6 months, you're not going to get any credit scores. You go get 3 secure credit cards, you can have no credit at all, make all the payments for 5 months, and in 5 months, you don't have any credit scores. At 6 months, that's when you get credit scores. Graham's absolutely right. You basically need to keep almost no balances at all on your credit. So you pay them off every single month. In 6 months, bam, you're going to have 700 and some odd credit scores. I mean, I had my first, it was in the 740s, and that was the first month reported on my credit. And I only had 3 credit cards that had only reported for 6 months. I had virtually no history at all. Very little history. Still had about a 740 something credit score. I mean, it's not much higher now. It's slowly going to go up. Graham in his video, he breaks down all the factors that go into your credit score, like paying on time makes up like 35%. Credit utilization is like 30%. Length of credit history is 15%. You know, which I have no credit history. I have very little. At this point, I've got 18 months worth of credit history. Yet I still have a pretty solid credit score. I mean, basically a 750 is a decent credit score, especially for someone who just got out of prison. Your total lines of credit is, I think it's like 10% of your credit score, and then like the last 10% of your credit score is made up of hard inquiries. And hard inquiries, that's actually hurting me because I have hard inquiries for applying for credit cards just to establish my credit history. Or just to try and, you know, one, of course, checking my credit to see if I even had any credit or what was showing up. And then the other hard inquiries were for applying for the credit cards. And the second hard inquiries were for my auto loan, which I got an auto loan about 5 months ago. I have one more payment to make, and then I'm going to be able to refinance it because I had to take an interest rate of like, I forget what my interest rate's like, 7 or 8%. And because I had so little credit, I couldn't get the like 1.5% interest rate that they were offering because I had no credit history. They were like, and I remember too, the finance woman was like, you know, it's funny. She's like, you've got really pretty good scores. She was like, I don't understand, you barely have any credit. I was like, but once I make another payment, that'll be 6 months worth of history and I can refinance car loan at a much better interest rate, probably 1 or 2%. What's great about credit is, it's horrible to use credit for the sake of credit. It's better to use your credit cards, obviously, as convenience. You never want. I never carry any balances on my credit cards. I think out of all 3 of my credit cards right now, and all of the limits have been raised at this point, my available credit is probably $2,000 or $3,000, which is not huge. But listen, I just got out of prison. I mean, on my Wells Fargo card, I think I owe $34. I love these apps, by the way. Like, this is like magic. Like, they didn't have anything like this when I went into prison. And it's a little thumbprint. I just touch it with my thumb. Comes right up. So what do I owe? Oh, no, look at that. I owe $65.60. I owe $65.60 on my Wells Fargo credit card. And I have a minimum payment of $0 due on the 12th. I mean, that's amazing. Is it Citigroup or Citibank? I don't know, it's Citicard, whatever. I don't know anything on my Citi card. And Capital One, I owe, ooh, nice, $0. I do owe $22,000 on my auto loan, which, isn't great. All right, so yeah, I never carry any balances, very little balances. Like, I'll pay that $65 off right now. The great thing about having good credit, and why it's so important, and I'm sure, I know everybody knows this, and I haven't been able to utilize my credit because everything I do has to go through the probation office. They have to okay everything I do. And so I'll be able to build my credit over the course of the next few years, and then at some point in the future, I'll be able to use my credit. And I'm lucky that when I walked out of prison, I had no credit. I remember I taught the real estate class, and one of my classes I actually taught was on credit and how to build your credit. And I remember one of the things a lot of these guys would say was, they would say, well, yeah, but I got outstanding bills. Because, I mean, a lot of these guys, they get arrested and the cops come and grab them, and maybe they had perfect credit, but the cops grab them and the last thing on their mind is, wow, I better pay off that $3,000 I owe Visa. They're not thinking that. They've got their cell phones all go bad. I mean, by the time they get out of prison 3, 4, 5 years later, if they're lucky, it's 7 or 8 years later. Well, if it's, obviously they don't go to prison if they're lucky. But if they're lucky, all of their credit has fallen off. All the negative credit has fallen off. And they get out with a clean slate like I did. The worst case scenario, obviously, is they do 2 or 3 years and they get out and they owe $40,000 in debt. But a lot of these guys, I would go over the credit, over how to build credit, and someone would say, we would pull their credit reports. Like, I was pulling their credit reports from inside prison. We would fill out the forms and we'd get their free annual credit report, and it would come back and we'd look it over, and I'd go over it with them and I'd say, okay, well, you got this and this and this. And sometimes it'd be $300 for some cell phone bill and $150 to Home Depot. Or, they were like just trying to build their credit, or maybe they'd have something would be on there. And remember, I would always tell them, look, go get the secured credit cards, use the secured credit cards to then pay off this debt and then make the payments on the credit cards. Because the most important thing is to get the credit cards, get the debt paid off and the credit cards started, so that you're building that history and that payment history. And I had a lot of guys, we rebuilt their credit while we were incarcerated. Paid off the stuff. Obviously you can, it's so easy to get stuff. Well, not easy, it's not easy, but it's time consuming, but it's a matter of just filling out paperwork. You can get stuff taken off your credit, and there's all kinds of guys that would do that in prison too. They would clean guys' credit histories up while they were incarcerated, and then they'd walk out and they'd have clean credit, and they'd immediately build up their credit. I mean, I'm really lucky that I have experience doing this. I was lucky that I was able to walk out the door and rebuild my credit so quickly. And I'm not, even the credit cards that I have they're not stellar credit cards, but it doesn't really matter because I don't have anything on them. They're doing exactly what they were designed to do, which is to help me reestablish my credit. And that's the most important thing, because at some point I'll be off supervised release or sorry, federal probation. I'll be off probation, and I'll need that credit. Anyway, I thought the video was pretty interesting. I don't really think I'm going to use any of the clips from Graham's video, because every time I do that, I get these I get the copyright strikes, and I don't know that Graham's the kind of guy that's going to be okay with me actually critiquing him. So I think I'm pretty much going to go with just maybe using his picture in the thumbnail and use some of his tags or something, and that's it. But I thought it was a pretty cool video that he had, and he's got some great videos, and I like watching his videos. He's got great information. He clearly puts a ton of time into his stuff. He puts a lot of time into his stuff, and which is great. I'd love to get to that point where I can put that kind of time into my videos, and I plan on getting there. So this is it. Do me a favor, subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, share the video, buy some merchandise, buy my book. I go, it's funny, I kind of go over a lot of this. I tell the story of just my story, but a lot of this I actually go over in my book. I kind of explain how I figured out how to build the credit profiles and the synthetic identities and everything that I did. I go over in my memoir, Shark in the Housing Pool. So check that out. And that's where I'm at. See ya.